Welcome Retro Scale Modelling. This is part 4 of Moebius's Battlestar Galactica Colonial Viper. Scale is 1 to 32. In this part, I'm going to be concentrating on the engine from building it to starting the painting process and weathering. So let's jump into this and see how well I get on. So I'm starting off with painting the wings, and for this I'm using Revel Aquacolor 371 Light Grey. As you can see there, I'm using quite a large brush. This is one of my larger flat brushes. This helps prevent any brush strokes appearing on the surface. And now that the fuselage is all dried, it's time to put the first coat on the fuselage as well. So that's on the same colour, the 371 light grey, and I'm using the same technique as I did on the wings, using the larger brush and just putting on a very thin light coat to begin with. However, when I go back to the engines, I'm again the same colour, but this is the third coat that's going on now, and I'm just building up that particular part of the build. This will take probably about 4 coats in total. This paint is actually a silk paint, so it takes a little bit longer to dry, maybe an extra 10 minutes for it to dry before I can paint over it. So while that second coat is drying, I'm going on to the canopy, and again using the same colour. Now I'm not masking this off. If you watch any of my other videos before, you know I tend not to mask off canopies. I prefer just to do it by eye. I am using a very fine brush on this one though. The guidelines on the canopy are quite easy to follow, and it was a simple case of just throwing my brush up. You really want to try and do it in one as less stroke as possible, but don't load up your brush with paint too much. It's a contradictory in terms really, but you just want about the right amount of paint on your brush, then drawing it up to your line. This is true even if you're masking your canopy as well, in order to get the clear line on your canopy. You don't want different thicknesses of paint running up what would be the framework of the actual canopy. If I do make a mistake or go off the line, it's just a simple case of taking a cocktail stick and rubbing off any of the excess paint. You can do this while the paint is still damp or dry, doesn't really matter. Onto the outer part of the engine, and here I'm using Tamiya's X34 Metallic Brown. Now I've never used this colour before, so I thought I would give it a go, and I really like the colour. It stands out quite well. Now there's various steps to painting this engine part. This is just the base colour going in at the moment. I'm using River Aquacolor 371 Light Grey once more. This is for the surrounding area. I didn't realise I hadn't painted that part, so I'm just going over that now. So while the engine is drying, I'm going to the exhaust to fit the clear plastic parts. These just fit in the back, and they just get pushed in without any drama. It's quite a nice fit. I think the clear blue comes out really well on these. So it's back to the Arcadia engines, and here I'm using Revel Aquacolor 90 Silver to highlight some areas. Now I've got quite a stiff brush here, and I'm barely putting any pigment on the brush, and I'm just brushing over all the raised areas. So I'm just slightly putting on the silver. If I feel I've put too much on, I'll just wipe it off with my finger. I'm also using the same technique to go over some of the raised areas on the outer part of the engine as well. Very, very lightly though. Also adding chip marks and scuff marks as I go along. I'm then switching over to Revel Aquacolor 91 Steel and using the same process but building up all the patina on the engine. And then it's over to Revel Aquacolor 08 Matte Black, and this is the same technique that I'm using with the silver, but I'm using a lot less black here. This is just to make things highlight more. If I put too much on, I'll either take it off my finger or use a damp towel. And once that's done, I'll have to wait for it all to dry, so you can see it starting to come through all the different colours and how the engine is going to build up. Now, a thing I like to do that I don't really show often is when I'm weathering, I'll take the bit of kitchen towel that I've been cleaning my brush with, and the kitchen towel is damp because of the excess water on the brush, and I'm just pressing that on the areas throughout the fuselage where the engine is. This is weathering it in a way. You can do this with a sponge as well, but I prefer a kitchen towel. But it's just very slight marks going on. Be careful if you do like this though, because you can put on too much. Think of it as like a watermark on the actual surface, but it all adds to the weathering process of your model. Of course, if you had darker colours as your base colour, then you would use a lighter paint to do this. But you can see how it dirties up the actual fuselage itself. It's quite an effective way to do it. So now the bottom piece of the fuselage, and this needed a bit of trimming up before I was able to fit it. This sprue meets the part. It was quite a thick bit of plastic, so that needed a lot of attention to get it to sit level. Onto the assembly of the engines. Now the instructions want you to do this part before you put on the intake area, but I felt if I set the glue in now, that may not get it into the right position. So what I've done is I'm going to be using the intake as my a jig just to hold it before I cement everything in place. So once I got it in position, see, it was quite tricky, and I'm glad I'd done it this way, so I knew it was going to fit into the intake once everything was in place. I just lined that up, then I'll put the cement down the seam and let it set. And once it was set, then I was able to fit it to the bottom part of the fuselage. Now the location points for these are like mini little cradles inside it. They're quite robust, so it's easy enough to line it up. You may have to be quite firmly pushing it in, but it does go in. I would suggest holding it in position and not trying to clamp it, because the nature of the shape of it, you may collapse it inside, and also you don't want that. So just press it in and hold it for 5 minutes or so if necessary. And once that was set, it was an important aspect that now is to scrape away any excess paint that's going to be going on to the contact points. This will just ensure that you have the best possible bond before placing on the intakes. Again, I had to press these in quite firmly, but once they were in, I didn't need any clamps or whatever. Just try and put them in so they go on square. They can have a tendency to lean to one side if you don't put them in straight away, in straight even. And it's the same with the exhaust as well. But you want to dry fit it anyway before you put your cement on. And this is where I'm going to leave part 4. This will need a good amount of time to dry before I go on to the next stage. So if you haven't done so already, why don't you check out the channel for my other builds. If you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, that way you'll be kept up to date not only with this build, but all my other builds as well, of course. Hit the like button, don't be afraid to leave a comment, and of course you can share the video. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.